Hey, YouTube world. It is Sarah Maslowski with KeyPoint Homes Group, and you here coming from the channel, moving to Georgia. So happy to be back here with you. I missed the last live stream that we were supposed to have because I actually got rear-ended in a car accident on my way home to come film and do this and go live. And so I had to make a executive decision. I did not think I was going to make it home because if you've ever been in a car accident, you know how long it takes for the police officers to show up, write the report, do all the things. So thank goodness I'm okay. And just damaged the car. And thankfully, this time it was not my fault. So I'm very happy about that. Today, you're in for a good treat. We are going to be diving into things that you need to know about buying a house here in Georgia, but specifically things that you need to look out for. And these are not necessarily unique to Georgia homes, but they're definitely something that if you're looking for a home in the northern part of Georgia, you need to know about these things. So thanks for joining us. Let me know where you're watching us from. Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. And we're going to be answering your questions today throughout the live stream and answering them. But I am not an expert on all the things that are hidden dangers in a Georgia home, like mold and radon and LP siding and things like that we're going to get into today. So I have a really great guest that is joining me today, and welcome James. James is with Enzyme Building Solutions. Welcome, James.
Glad to have you. Glad for you to have me here. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Thanks for joining. So Enzyme Building Solutions is one of a vendor partner of ours. And so whenever you're working with us as a client, there's ever anything that goes wrong with your house or something that comes up in a home inspection where we're like, oh, we probably need to get this looked at. James and his company is one of our go-tos that we go to. And James, you're like an expert in all things that could go wrong with your house, right?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I'm pretty knowledgeable. So I'm the marketing manager with Enzyme, and I pretty much do a lot of with the aspects of our digital and our social and putting together our educational content. So I have a good background, a good grasp on the aspects of the things that we do as a company.
So tell us a little bit about what Enzyme Building Solutions, what y'all specialize in.
So Enzyme is we're pretty much a general contractor company, but we have specialty services that we offer. One is the aspects of restoration. So anything with mold damage, water damage, fire damage, we do restoration for all those. In terms of mold remediation, we actually do reconstruction. So we'll go out and if we need to tear out drywall, if we need to remove other building materials, we can have our construction team go in there and rebuild it. We also provide services in the area of indoor air quality. So we do asbestos testing. We do testing for indoor air pollutants, volatile organic compounds, those types of things. And also mostly radon. We deal with radon a lot. Not only do we do the testing for radon, but we also install radon mitigation systems designed specifically for the homes that we're working with. We also have a sister branch of our company that pretty much works specifically on home renovations, and we have a custom home construction service that we offer. It's pretty much like a white glove service where we walk a home buyer or landowner through the process of building their dream home from whatever they want, and pretty much the sky is the limit there.
Awesome. So we've got John who's watching us from Western Washington. And we have to say hello to another regular. The truth is coming to us from Philadelphia. So we are excited to share with you. And of course, if you have any questions, but one of the biggest things that comes up most frequently on home inspection reports that I encounter is mold. And oftentimes it's a part of the conversations that I have with clients when we're putting together, kind of educating them about making the move here to Georgia, about what they need to be mindful of.
Yep.
And thankfully, I've had a lot of great experience. And I'm not an expert, but I have encountered it enough to kind of know what to look for. But maybe just share with us a little bit about why is there mold in homes, and where do those mostly come in?
Yeah, so one of the things that we like to share about ourselves, our company, is we're a building science company. So we pretty much look at different aspects of a home as different systems that come together to affect, how the home performs in terms of energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and of course, moisture management. So we deal with that a lot. Now, with mold, mold is very, very common in our area, primarily because of the climate that we experience here in Georgia. Most of the southeast is pretty very much similar, but in Georgia, you get a lot of hot and humid climate throughout the year, through most of the months of the year. So what tends to happen is you get high relative humidity. That's really what we're looking for here. So mold, that's a little bit of a intro to mold. Mold pretty much needs only three things to grow. It needs an organic surface to grow on. It needs oxygen, and it needs sufficient moisture. And out of the three of those, there's only one of them that we can control, and that's the moisture. And moisture does not necessarily have to be in the form of bulk water, like, when you open your faucet and you have water running, but it can be in the form of high relative humidity, so water vapor. And when the water vapor in the air gets to be about 65%, then you have enough moisture in the air for mold to start growing. So what happens is, especially in Georgia, when you have hot days during the daytime, usually hotter air is able to hold more moisture, right? So when you have more moisture being held by hot air in the nighttime, when that air cools, that moisture is no longer be able to held by that air, so it has to settle on surfaces. And when it settles on different surfaces, like you see here on these building materials like joists, especially in crawl spaces and basements, it condensates onto those surfaces, and then when it stays there for a little while, the building materials get saturated, and then you have mold growth, because obviously that's an organic material.
Yeah. So I think most people think that you're going to walk into a house and, open up a cabinet or a closet and see black mold growing, and, like what we think of mold growing in your shower.
Right.
When I became more experienced in real estate and experienced more mold growth, one of the most common places that I see it working with clients, and maybe you can tell us this as well, James, is mostly in basements.
Yes.
Basements here in Georgia, and it's very hard to tell. To me, doesn't look like what you would think it looks like. It's really kind of like white little spots, or sometimes even black specks on the exposed beams in the wood.
Right.
But most often, not always, but a lot of times, you can tell by the smell walking into a basement. If it smells moldy and mildewy, that is like alarm bells for me ringing, and I'm trying to find the source of it and see where it is.
Right. Yeah, basements and even crawl spaces, they're very, very common to have mold. And primarily it's because these are areas of the home that are below grade. So in essence, they're pretty much underground, where you have dirt that surrounds the foundation, and maybe one or two sides, or three. You have pretty much dirt below, and maybe dirt at one or two sidewalls, and that can basically cause moisture to intrude into the home, because of the fact that there's obviously going to be moisture vapor that's going to come into the house and raise raise the relative humidity level, ultimately giving more potential for mold to grow.
So the picture that I just put up here for everybody to see, this was actually in a new construction home that I had some buyers recently close on. And so this is a fantastic reason why you should get an inspection, no matter if it's a resale house or if it's a brand new construction home. Oftentimes I'll have that conversation. Buyers will be like, do we really need one on a new construction home? And like, this is why you need one. So to someone that's uneducated, you look at this wood that's pictured here, and it just looks like kind of like staining from the lumber yard, right?
Yeah.
And a good inspector is going to be able to call out and say, hey, I think that's mold, and you should probably have someone come out and test this. And so we called in, some experts. They came out, tested it, confirmed that it was mold. And actually they didn't really need to do testing, because you can really just, whenever you're trained in this, you can just look at it and know for certain that that's what it is. Now, we were able to call this to the builder's attention, and they tried to remediate the problem themselves by using a mixture of bleach and water. Tell me about that, James. Does that work?
Yeah. To be honest, this situation happens very, very commonly, where you find mold in new construction homes. Actually, a lot of the mold remediation that we do in our company is actually for home builders.
Okay.
Um, we have situations all the time where we get called out to a job site where you have lumber that's been sitting on the lumber yard for weeks and it's been rained on and it comes to the site with mold already on it. Or it may not come on with mold on it, but it sits in the job site 2 3 weeks. It gets rained on, it's exposed, and obviously you're going to have mold growth in the right situation. So we see this a lot. When it comes to cleaning and remediating mold, bleach can be used to clean mold, but it's not often the best solution to clean mold, especially on porous surfaces such as wood. What happens is mold, when it grows, it actually ingests its roots into the pores of that surface that it's actually growing on. And when you use bleach to try and clean it, bleach only basically kills it at the surface level, but it doesn't go into the porous surface and penetrate that surface to actually kill the root. So it's kind of like, our owner always talks about this and says, it's kind of like, when you have a weed whacker and you go out in the yard and you whack down the weeds and, you don't see them from the ground anymore, but the roots are still there. They're going to come back. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what's going to happen here with mold if we try to clean it with bleach, especially mold on a porous surface.
Yeah.
If it's a non-porous surface, like stuff in the bathroom, like tile, things like that, bleach can work, but
Right.
porous surfaces is not the best solution.
So finding mold in a house doesn't necessarily have to be a deal killer. It's actually common. And, I see it a lot in basement homes. I also see it a lot in homes that are on crawl spaces. But it can be effectively treated. So you can't do it with bleach. It can't be like a DIY solution. And it has to be with a company like yours, James, that comes in and professionally does it. Tell me a little bit more about how y'all do that.
Yeah, so we don't encourage DIY in situations where you have a lot of mold. Now, if it's a small surface and you have it in an area where you can just kind of wipe it off and you can manage it, sure. But in most cases that we see especially with when you're dealing with crawl spaces and basements and even lumberyard mold, you're dealing with a lot of mold. And what happens is in remediation, mold spores get agitated during remediation, during when you go actually to physically remove mold from the surface. And those spores go airborne. And when they go airborne, they look to attach to other surfaces. And when they attach to other surfaces, obviously, you get the sufficient moisture and it will start to grow. So what we try to do is we try to basically set up containment. If we're in a home and we're trying to remediate a specific area, we don't want to cross-contaminate other areas of the home. So we set up containment chambers. It's almost kind of like, setting up when you're painting a house, you put those little barriers so you don't get paint spilling over on other areas. We're kind of doing the same thing here. This is a great image. This is actually one of our guys that was doing some mold remediation in a new construction home where a pipe has bursted in a floor above. It had leaked water, and so now we had to go deal with the mold in the ceiling, cutting out drywall. But we wanted to contain it and not allow spores to travel through the rest of the home and cause contamination where mold could grow in other places. So that's the type of work we do. It's a very meticulous process, and it has to be done right, or it could cause people to get sick.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about like the hidden dangers in Georgia homes that you need to be looking out for if you're considering buying a house here. And these problems aren't necessarily unique to Georgia, but depending upon where in the state you're looking, you're going to have more mold here in the North Georgia area because we have more basements, we have more crawl spaces. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And you want to really want to make sure that you're working with a good inspector that is trained and can call out these things. But also a lot of these things too, you can just, if you're working with a good real estate agent, they can help you identify some of these hidden dangers ahead of time. And so that's something good to know that whenever you're searching for the perfect house. But if you find that perfect house, and just because it has mold in a crawl space or a basement does not have to be a deal killer. It's easily taken care of. And usually, and likely should, the seller will, pay for that remediation. Because here's the thing, here in Georgia, you have to fill out a form called a seller's disclosure statement. And one of those questions is there mold in the house, or has there ever been treated for mold? And once they then know that they have mold in the house, they now legally have to disclose that to all future buyers. And I'm sure that if you're a buyer and you see on a seller's disclosure that they have mold, but they haven't treated it, you're not going to buy that house. So it really kind of forces the seller's hand to remediate and fix the issue. So there's lots of solutions of how to get to the finish line and help the seller and put them in contact with great company like Enzyme Building Solutions that can help. If you're just joining us and you have any questions about any of these types of hidden dangers or things to look for whenever you're buying a home here, let me know in the comments. We're going to answer your questions as we talk here live. And we're going to dig into radon next, which is a huge thing here in North Georgia that you need to know about. And of course, if you want to talk about the market or anything like that, let me know and we'll make sure to answer those questions. So, James,
Yeah.
I have a hard time explaining what radon is. So can you just tell me, educate us about what radon is?
Sure. Yeah. Radon is pretty much a radioactive gas that comes from the ground. It comes from the existence of uranium in the ground that is decaying. It's going through a decay process. So uranium decays down to what we know as radium, and then radium decays down to what we know as radon, a gas. And pretty much it's a very, very, very small molecule that can travel through almost anything. And it looks for the path of least resistance to travel, and that's usually how it gets in our homes. And radon obviously is it's a class 1 carcinogen, so it's the second leading cause of lung cancer in this country, only second to smoking.
Wow.
Radon is estimated from data that the EPA has gathered. They say that radon is estimated to kill about 800 people a year in Georgia alone, and 21,000 people across the country every year. So it's a thing.
That is crazy. So radon as a gas, it's something that you can't see, smell, or taste, right? So you're not going to be able to walk into a home and smell like, oh, this home has radon. You just told me that it's a radioactive gas. I did not know that it causes lung cancer. So that's, definitely huge. Every home should be tested. And what you're looking at right now, this little white thing, that is actual the radon mitigation system. And we're going to get into a little bit more about how you remediate radon and that sort of thing. But in my experience, and you can talk a little bit about this, James, I personally see higher levels of radon in homes with basements than homes not on basements. Can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Sure. So homes that are on basements, the simple way of looking at it is the fact that the home it's got more levels to it. So there's what we call the stack effect. It's a phenomenon that takes place in every single building. No matter what the building structure is, every single building has what's called a stack effect. And what it is basically the movement of air from the bottom of the house up and outward. And it's constantly happening. And what happens is, as this stack effect is taking place, it's drawing up these earth gases. Now, the higher the building is, the more stack effect you're going to have. So essentially, that's why homes that are on basements that are 2 stories are going to have more radon, because there's a bigger draw of gases that's being pulled from the earth.
And so it's my understanding that the reason that Georgia has like a higher concentration, or at least North Georgia has a higher concentration of radon gas, is because we have a lot of granite and rock in the ground up here in North Georgia compared to South Georgia. Is that right?
That is somewhat true. Yes, there
Okay.
is more rock, there is more granite in the soil here in North Georgia. But the difference that it makes is it's actually very, very minimal. It's like trace amounts in terms of difference. The truth is that uranium exists everywhere. Honestly, it's everywhere, and that's really the main cause of radon. Granite does have radon in it, and it will let off radon. But ultimately, we have uranium pretty much all over the earth, and that's where radon is primarily going to come from.
So here is a map from the University of Georgia, and it shows kind of like the northern part of Georgia, kind of like Macon North.
Yeah.
So you see Bibb County down here at the the bottom of the map right there in like a light yellow color.
Yep.
So there's more uranium in this part of Georgia, and we're just showing you Georgia, but radon testing and gases exist all across the United States, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just a unique problem here to Georgia, but we
Yeah.
have more naturally occurring radon in North Georgia. So
Absolutely.
you can see that a lot of the counties that I serve and educate you on, so Hall County, where Gainesville is located, Forsyth County, Gwinnett, um, you have Walton County, Jackson, Barrow. So all of those areas are areas where we would recommend having a home that you're going to buy, have it radon tested. And this is the service that you can pay for, usually through your home inspector. But when you work with me, we are going to have Enzyme Building Solutions go out and perform a radon test for you at no cost so that we can make sure that your home is safe for you and your family.
And in terms of the map, if I could say something about that map really quick,
Yeah.
this map was constructed by the UGA Extension, which is pretty much the partner for the state of Georgia with doing research on radon. When they created this map, they were actually basically they took out a bunch of tests, free tests that they sent out to all the counties, and said, here, give these tests out to people and have them do these and send us back the data so that we can actually, put together a map of what data we find in terms of how radon exists around the state. And the reason why you're seeing so much variation here is because some counties more than others participated.
Huh. Okay. That makes
And
sense.
so that's where you're seeing a lot of the variation between the north and the south part of Georgia. Most
Right.
of the south part of Georgia didn't really participate much. So
Got
they're
it.
actually working on trying to get a new map that's more updated and more accurate. But ultimately, this is still great information to have. And like you said, if you're wanting to buy a home, it's actually a great idea to have the home tested wherever you are, just to be safe and to know that the levels that are below that action level.
So before we dive into that, I want to talk about the testing and how that's done. Uh,
Yeah.
and then we'll get into like how do you get rid of radon gas in a home and make it safe. But we have some follow-up questions from mold. Carl says, besides just the smell and the water damage, how might you identify if a home has mold?
Well, there are a couple ways. A simple way is if this is a little trick. Some people can get this to work and some not. But if you take a flashlight and you go into, like, for instance, if you're going to a basement or a dark area and you're looking for mold, if you take a flashlight and you shine the flashlight at a profile and catch the mold at a specific angle, you can see where it'll actually glow, almost like glow in the dark.
Hmm.
It's a good way where you can try to pick out mold growth. The other way is we will actually, when we do our inspections, we actually go out there with specific tools. Like we use hygrometers to measure the amount of moisture in the air. We'll actually use an IR camera to look at all the different building materials and to see if there's any moisture saturation in areas that we do believe there is mold. So if we can actually see something that looks like mold, you scan an IR camera over it and you'll see if there is moisture there that's obviously causing that mold to have food to grow.
Yeah. And I would say, Carl, that usually the best line of defense, the person that's going to see it and notify first is going to be the home inspector. So they are crawling everywhere around that house, inside and outside, underneath the house, opening up every nook and cranny and searching. And when you work with a great home inspector, that's what they're doing. And so, sometimes I have home inspectors will call out what they think is mold. And I've had this happen before where they say, hey, I think this is mold. And 80% of the time it is. And then also I've had instances where it's not mold. And so that's always good, but you always want someone that's going to err on the side of caution. And the next step in that is getting an expert company out there like Enzyme Building Solutions to come and give their expert opinion and do the testing and the analysis to give us the accurate result.
And testing is another actual mold testing, because I referred to inspections earlier, but testing where we actually do air samples. We can do an air sample. We can do a swab test of the surface to see if there's actually mold there and what type. It'll actually tell us what types of mold. We have to send those off to a lab. Usually takes about a couple of days to process, and then they send us back the results.
Yeah. Good. Um, John, this is a great question. We're going skipping back over now to radon. Does the age of a home play a factor in radon levels? And I'm also going to ask this question about mold too, because I think that's relative, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. The age of the house, in terms of mold, it does not have anything to do with mold. Mold specifically just needs those three ingredients: oxygen, an organic surface, and the sufficient moisture. And it can grow in a brand new house, and it can grow in a 1940s house.
Hmm.
It can grow in a freshly new renovated house, and it can grow in a house, obviously, that's been neglected. So that's pretty much your mold. With radon, it is a little bit different. The age of the house does have something to do with radon. So back in the, I would say back in the 60s, 70s, maybe even in the 80s, um, the building practices at that time were not as good as they are today. And one of the things that builders are doing every year is they're looking for ways to build houses with more energy efficiency. And one of the biggest ways that you can make a house more energy efficient is by making it more airtight. You seal up the building envelope. So there's all kinds of different ways and products and techniques and methods that are out there now that our builders are using to air seal these homes. And in homes that were built from a long time ago that aren't built so tight, when radon would get in, it would have the ability to leak out. Same way your conditioned air would be able to leak out, or even maybe the smells of the neighbor cooking food would be able to leak in. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But now with homes being more energy efficient, radon comes in and it can very well get trapped in, and it doesn't have a path for escape. And this is why mitigation is necessary.
That's interesting. I did not know that, but it makes sense. So talk, how do you do the testing? And whenever you do the testing, you're getting results back. And what does that mean?
Yeah. So when we do testing with radon, we use what's called a CRM. It's a continuous radon monitor. It's like a little device, and basically what it does, what it does is it takes readings every hour on the hour. We usually set it for about 48 hours in what we call a short-term test. And basically, it tells us what the radon levels are in that hour. And what we do is over a 48-hour period, we take an average of what the levels were. So the levels may be average. I'm going to throw out some numbers here. It could be average 5.6. But there may be times during the test where levels went up to 7.9 or maybe been as low as 3.2. What we're always looking for is the average, because that's pretty much dictates, it's telling us this is the average level of radon that the homeowner is going to experience, them and their family throughout their home, throughout the year in their home. And that's why this action level is set to be, dealing with the average.
So that process takes about 24 to 48 hours, right, to get an accurate reading and get that report back on a property?
Correct. Usually about 48 hours, we get it back, and then we're able to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. So you get a report back, and it's going to come out with a number on the average. And so here you see this chart that says, anything above 4.0, the EPA recommends that you do radon mitigation. And you actually see that if it's 3.0 or above, the World Health Organization actually recommends, well, maybe they're saying 2.7, anything over 2.7 for it to be mitigated. So is radon a deal killer in a house? If you go get your home tested and let's say that it's, the average is 7, is that a deal killer?
Radon is not a deal killer. It shouldn't be a deal killer at all, because the truth is, it's not as scary as it seems. We have to be educated about it, obviously. What we don't know is really what scares us. If you go outside right now, you walk out your front door, you're going to be exposed to some level of radon. Obviously, it's going to be a very minimal amount because it's dissipating into the atmosphere. But radon is all around us. It's everywhere. The problem is when it actually gets trapped into a home, it's not a deal breaker. It shouldn't be a deal breaker. It's easily taken care of through a radon mitigation system.
So tell us a little bit more about how a radon mitigation system works,
Yeah.
and yeah, how do you do that?
So there's two different types of radon mitigation systems that I'm going to talk about here. We're going to talk about active and passive. So an active radon mitigation system is like what you see in this picture on the left side, is where a home it's already been built, obviously. So what we're doing is we're going back and we're retrofitting it. We're putting in a system that is going to be able to exhaust those radon gases. So what we do is we go into the foundation area of the home. If it has a basement, we'll go into the basement. We'll basically drill a hole into the slab, and we'll pull out about a gallon of dirt, and that exposes an area where gases can be accumulated, and then they will be able to come up through a pipe that's going to go into that hole. That pipe is then directed out to an exterior wall, and then it's connected outside of that wall with the fan, and right, just like that. And that fan is going to be what's drawing the earth gases up from underneath the home and up and out above the roof line. As I said earlier in the beginning, radon looks for the path of least resistance. So this fan is pretty much like a standard fan, and it's able to draw those earth gases up from underneath the slab, collect them, and vent them out above the house even before they can actually accumulate in the home. The other type of a system is a passive system. And this is when a new construction home has a radon mitigation system built into it, where you can't even see it. It's actually built underneath the home, and the pipe is actually sent up through a chase inside of the house, and then it pokes out through the roof and exhausts the gas. The reason why it's not an active system is because it does not have a fan. What it's doing is it's relying on the stack effect, the natural stack effect of the house, to pull those earth gases up and out. And in the case that it does need an additional, flow of suction, we can always go back in there and add a fan to make it active.
Got it. So oftentimes, whenever I have clients, when we get high levels of radon back, usually sellers are very agreeable to paying for this radon mitigation system to be installed. One of the frequently asked questions that I get from buyers is, what is the upkeep of this thing? And is this going to be like a huge expense that I'm going to have to now maintain this thing? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, so the radon mitigation system is pretty much, I don't want to say zero maintenance, but it's very low maintenance. In terms of electricity, you can probably bet on $100 to $150 of electricity a year to run the system. So it's very, very minimal cost there. In terms of maintenance, it doesn't require any maintenance, no cleaning, nothing like that. You just let the system run. The only thing is that it has to be, you want to continue testing your home every 2 years, because the truth of the matter is that radon levels can change over time, and you're always getting uranium decaying. So your radon levels this year may not be the same next year. So you have to continue getting it tested.
Right. Carl has a great question. Am I finding more homes with radon devices, and does that increase the price when selling? So personally, I find that there's still not a lot of education about radon for Georgia home sellers or homeowners. I'll be honest with you, I grew up in South Georgia, never heard of radon. And radon wasn't something that was on my radar until I became a real estate agent. We went through the home buying process before I became an agent 6 years ago, and our agent never mentioned anything about radon or that we should have it tested. So I feel like there's a lot of not great education out there for current homeowners. It's becoming something that's being talked about more and more, and more buyers are now educated about that. And so most real estate agents are having conversations with their sellers about, hey, if we find radon levels high in your home, this is going to be a cost that you're going to be expected to absorb to put in that radon mitigation system. Whenever we go and tour homes, often, the question is like, we're in the basement usually, and they're pointing at a pipe and they're like, hey, what is that pipe? And I was like, oh, that's a radon mitigation system. And I always take that as a great sign that a seller is very conscientious about their home, and that they're taking measures to make sure that their home is safe. And to me, that's a good sign of a proactive homeowner. And that usually if they're doing that type of thing, then they're also usually doing other good things to take care of their home. Would you say that's the case, James?
Absolutely. I 100% agree. When I see a radon mitigation system, I see somebody who cares. Obviously, they care. And there is not that much education out there on it, which is one of the things that we're trying to do is bring up more education. We do a lot of courses and teach about radon. We have a lot of stuff on our website about radon. It's funny because we even try to educate builders, to put in passive radon systems in new construction homes that they're building. And a lot of them are even reluctant to do it because they feel like there's this negative stigma when a home buyer comes in and they see, something in terms of radon having to do with the house. And it's like, oh my God, did this house have a problem? And so it causes a lot of worry because people just don't understand it. And
I'm
once
also going to stereotype us here a little bit. I think sometimes maybe some Georgians might be of the mindset of, oh, that's hokey and that's not real.
Yeah.
Or, they
Absolutely.
just think, look, my grandma, lived here and she never had any problems. So why do I need to do this?
Yeah.
Sometimes, you have that mindset when people haven't come around or been educated because there's not a whole lot of information out there.
And we even see it all the time with people that we're going to do inspections with. There's one of our inspectors went into a home probably a couple of years ago, and he told us the story. He tells the story all the time where there was a homeowner who called us in to do a radon, test. And from the time that the homeowner, when we knocked on the door, he opened the door. And from the time that we got there to the time that we left, he just basically was like, you know what? This is a myth. I don't believe in this, but I'm still going to get it tested. He followed the inspector down to the basement where he's going to set the test, and he's just telling him about how he doesn't believe in radon. It's not real, and so there's a lot of challenges with it, and all we can do is educate people as the best that we can.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Carl, it does not add any value to a home, but I definitely think that it gives a potential buyer a lot of peace of mind to know that that's already been taken care of or that there's already preventative measures there in place.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Another thing that I see a lot of times with clients is when we're in a basement, they'll also point out and they'll point to this thing. They're like, what's that? And it's a dehumidifier. And they think that that's a big red warning sign that there's a dehumidifier in the basement. Obviously, there must be issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I kind of jump in and I say, no, this is a great sign of a responsible homeowner that's taken preventative measures to make sure that there's never that accumulation of excess moisture in the basement. And it's a great thing whenever you see it. So I'm sure you see that a lot. And there's, even if you have a finished or an unfinished basement, you always really need a dehumidifier down there.
Yeah. Yeah. We tell homeowners all the time, if you live in Georgia in a hot and humid climate, put a dehumidifier in your basement and leave it in there year round.
Yeah.
Because it's a very minimal expense that can save you thousands from having to do remediation in the case where, because a lot of times people don't use their basements much. And if you leave your basement and you don't come down there for a week, 2 weeks at a time, and mold starts growing in there, and by the time you find out it gets to be too late, it can become a very big problem. So putting in a $200-300 dehumidifier is a great idea.
Yeah. We bought a home on a basement, and this was prior to me becoming a real estate agent. And, once I learned about this, I went to my husband, I was like, we need a dehumidifier. We've got to get one of these things because, as a seller, I don't want to have to deal with potential mold.
Yeah.
If we ever go and sell our house, because it's mold remediation is very expensive. It can be very costly, something that is, very little in terms of maybe like the location, or it's just in one little spot. You have to treat a big area and there's a lot of steps involved. And sometimes it involves removing insulation and replacing insulation, and it can be very expensive. So anything that we can do to proactively prevent that is definitely needed for home ownership.
Yep. Yeah, we have a blog on our website where we talk about dehumidifiers and running them in basements. Just trying to educate people on how it's a great idea to preventing mold. Something so small could just make a big difference, but it's, like I said, it's education, but that's what we're trying to do, give people the education about it.
Yeah. So speaking of cost, mold remediation, that's a big cost. When it comes to doing a radon mitigation system. Let's say that you're watching this, you just bought a house, you didn't use me, and you didn't have me on your side, and so you don't know if you have radon in your house. Or let's say that you're watching this and you're thinking about making a move, and you currently own a home here in Georgia. Um, Radon testing, relatively inexpensive or sometimes free, depending upon who you're working with. And then second, if you do need a radon mitigation system, what is that kind of range?
Yeah. So testing is, I would say, companies do testing anywhere from $150 to, I believe I've even heard all the way up to $225 for radon testing. If you want have a great access to radon testing, we do testing for all of Sarah's clients for free. So definitely tap into her on that. In terms of a system installation, we basically see an average for a basement or a slab home. It's really anywhere between $1,800 and $2,000. That's give or take, and it depends on, we might have to do some sealing of the cold joints in the basement if that's necessary, sealing any cracks in the foundation, just to prevent anywhere that radon can start to leak in. For a crawl space home, it can become significantly more expensive because of the fact that putting in a radon system in a crawl space has to have an encapsulation also done with it. We're basically sealing up the crawl space. We're putting a vapor barrier down and we're sealing it up to the walls with spray foam. And that way we can actually keep the radon levels going straight into our pipe and not, leaking into everything else. So it can become a little bit more expensive with crawl spaces.
Yeah. Speaking of crawl spaces, we don't have a ton of them here. And yet I would say maybe 10% of the homes have them. But that is one of the number one places that if we're looking at a home together and it's on a crawl space and we can open up that door, I'm looking in that door with you and pointing out some things that you need to know. So vapor barriers are a great sign, but sometimes you see a vapor barrier in there that looked like it was installed in 1960 and a bunch of raccoons have been living in there, and it's all piled up in an area. But you can also see if there's been rainwater in there, and that's a huge sign for mold growth and stuff like that. And so in my opinion, as a real estate agent, if you see those types of things in a crawl space, it usually means that there's probably other problems in the house, meaning that this hasn't been like a proactive homeowner that has taken great care of their house.
Yeah.
And usually that too is a very costly thing to remediate and get to where it should be. And sometimes that can be hard to negotiate with the seller. And so those are some proactive things that we're going to look for together just to make sure like we know what we're walking into if this is a home that we really want to pursue.
Yes, absolutely. Crawl spaces. If you ever want to know about a home, go right to the crawl space and how that home has been taken care of. Crawl spaces, they're very, very sensitive part of the home. There's a statistic out there that says, and I don't know exactly where it's from, but it's a very well-known statistic that says 50%, up to 50% of the air that we breathe in the upper levels of the home comes from beneath the home. So if you have a crawl space that is infested with mold growth, you're going to start breathing in those spores, and that's how a lot of people get sick. We've had people that move into a home and they didn't have an inspection done, or maybe the crawl space wasn't inspected well. And then 2-3 months later, we get a call and it's like, oh, I've been living in this house and I went to the doctor and I've been getting sick and I just can't figure out what's going on. And they told us to have the home tested for mold. And we go right to that crawl space and we find it, where that crawl space is what's causing that person to get sick because of the air that's coming up from that crawl space into the home. So it's a very, very delicate subject. And, like you said, a lot of times sellers don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
But,
I also see a lot of like dead animal or rodent droppings in a crawl space. And, there's just all of that feces down there and you're breathing that air. So, sealing up a crawl space homes, they can present a little bit of challenges. And, it's very, very rare to see a newer construction home that was built on a crawl space. So that's just something to keep in mind. You're going to see more of those in older homes.
Right.
John had a good question. So They're replacing a roof as part of a sale of their 1970s home. I'll have to make a whole new video on what the roofing industry is doing these days. And the roofer noted that we need more ventilation. Is that something that would help radon levels as well as prevent other problems?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has to be done right. So anytime, as we talked about before, when we look at houses as a series of systems. So you have roofing system, siding system, HVAC system, plumbing system, electrical system. Anything that you do in one area is going to affect other areas. So when bringing in ventilation, you can bring in ventilation, and you want to make sure that it's not going to affect any other aspects of moisture management in the house. Um, and you want to make sure that you have the right insulation, because there's different things that can be affected, and I don't want to get too technical here, but ultimately bringing in ventilation will help. There's what we call, when we talking about HVAC, for instance, um, we actually install what's called ERVs. It's what's called an energy recovery ventilator. It's pretty like the simplest way to look at it is a fresh air machine. Basically, what it does is it can be programmed to bring in fresh air into the house from the outdoors while it's exhausting stale air. And it's specifically designed to recover 80 up to 80% of the energy that goes into the air that has already been conditioned in the home. So you have the air in the house, you're heating it or you're cooling it, and you're now throwing it outside. You don't want to lose that, money that you just put into cooling that air. So this ERV is actually going to recover 80% of that cool energy and put it back into the air that's coming in. This is one of the machines that we actually use to alleviate radon situations sometimes, because you put in a radon mitigation system and you put in a second suction point for a system, and it's just not enough because of just how much radon is in that house. And we'll have to go install an ERV for extra ventilation. But we'll take it into account, how it affects other areas of the house in terms of moisture management, indoor air quality, all those types of things.
Got it. Brandon asked if you, James, were a home inspector. If so, he needs one next month for his new construction home. So James is not a home inspector, but we both work with a fantastic home inspector that I would love to recommend to you. So send me an email at hello@KeyPoint Homes Group, and I will send you over his information. But he's great. He's the one that found the mold in the new construction home for my buyers that we worked through. Poppy, you just closed on a home today in Georgia. Congratulations. Looks like you found me a little bit too late. You need a roof replaced. I have a fantastic roofing company that I can recommend to you that are fantastic. So if you will send me an email also at hello@keypointhomesgroup.com, we will get you the roofer. James knows them. We work well together, but they are just simply fantastic. And you asked a follow-up question, which was really good, is there a certain kind of roof that's better than others here in hot Georgia? I will say that you predominantly only see one type of roof in Georgia, and that's just asphalt shingle roof. That's the best to hold up for, weather events and, wind and all the things that we get here in Georgia. And it's the most cost efficient. There are some companies that do metal roofs. I don't see that very often. But there's really, it's not like in Florida where you're doing, terracotta roofs or anything like that. Pretty much here, the main thing is just asphalt shingle roofs.
Yeah, shingle roofs are going to be the most durable in terms of all the elements that homes are exposed to in Georgia. We get hail, we get wind, we get rain. But there are other options out there that can be just as good, if not better. If you want to spend the extra money, there's tile roofing, there's cedar roofing, and those can significantly be more durable and even have a better curb appeal for the home. But in most cases, a shingle roof is just fine. It's very durable, it's very efficient, and we see that a lot in our homes in Georgia.
Yeah. So your follow-up question, Poppy, is what about an architectural roof? I think you're referring to architectural shingles, which is pretty much what all roofing companies use today. There's a much cheaper, just traditional asphalt shingle. But most all roofers are going to recommend to you that architectural shingle. It just looks better. I'm sure it has some more benefits that the great roofing company that I can connect you with can educate you about.
Yeah.
Um, Carl said, is it smart to buy a fairly new home without doing an inspection? It's a 2-year-old home. I always recommend a home inspection. A lot of times clients will not err on the side of caution, and they won't do one on a brand new construction home. But I just share with you that example of, if that seller or if that buyer would not have done that new construction inspection, they would have had a home with mold growing, and then they would have inherited a huge problem whenever they go to sell it or start having health issues. So I always think it's good and that you should do it, but regardless of how old the home is, I always think you should have one. And here's the reason why on a new construction home, or even if it's only 2 years old, you don't know the quality of that builder. And there's a lot of great builders and there's a lot of bad builders. And you also don't know what the sellers have done to that home during that time period, or what they've neglected to take care of. I'm sure, James, you've seen some stuff in your day.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of different scenarios where home buyers didn't do a home inspection, and it comes back to bite them, one way or another. Sometimes you may not see everything in the home inspection, and things are going to happen regardless. But home inspectors are trained to go in there and look for problems, and as homeowners, when we're going in there looking to buy a home, we're looking for the pretty things. Is it nice paint? Does it have, nice granite and all those type of things? But there are things that can get overlooked very easily, and we see it all the time. And it's unfortunate, but it's really wise to always get a home inspection done.
Yeah, and that home inspection is going to cost you $500-$600 depending upon the size of the house. You're likely spending $400,000 plus. Yeah. And investing a lot of money in this. That's a relatively easy thing. And, the best case scenario, they don't find anything and it's just like small cosmetic issues. And then you're like, yes, we're buying a really great house. Yeah. Worst case scenario, they're uncovering some medium to bigger things and you're getting that seller to pay for those repairs. And so it's just giving you that peace of mind knowing that you're getting, you're not inheriting any big problems right off the bat.
And you want the home inspector to find things, I wouldn't want a home inspector to come in and find nothing, what I'm saying? Because there's something wrong with every house. That's just the way it is. There is no house that is built perfectly by a builder where they hand over your keys, because even the builder is going to come back and do warranty work. So there are things in every single house. You want to know what they are and just prepare yourself for whatever has to be done to fix the issues.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I saw an inspection report from a buyer who had worked with another agent, and this inspection was so bad. Like there was hardly anything on it. Like that is the biggest indicator of a bad home inspector, when the report is like 10 pages long and they found like 3 things wrong with the house. When I tell you that report should be at least 20 pages long, if not 50 pages, and you want all kinds of information, you want that home inspector to be calling out the tiniest things that are wrong in the house. I'm not saying that you should be concerned about those tiny things, but that just shows you the thoroughness of that home inspector and that he's really looking at the house.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anupam asks, can we request a new HVAC system from the seller just because it is old, but not broken at the time of closing? So this is a tricky one. Yes and no. And it depends on the market. It depends on the situation of the seller. So I'll give you an example. The importance of having that home inspection is that you really want to make sure that the HVAC system is working well. If I see an HVAC system that's like 15 years older, I'm recommending to my buyer as part of our inspection process that we're bringing in an HVAC company to come do their own testing. Because what the home inspector can do, he can make sure that the air levels are blowing as they should and that the differentials are right and the temperature is right, but they're not actually like looking inside the machine to see if it's leaking or leaking condenser unit, that sort of thing. So a licensed HVAC company can come in there and give you that full clean bill of health, or they can say, yeah, this is about to kick the bucket, or here's what needs to be replaced. And then that gives you a little bit more ammo to negotiate with the seller. Now, if that system is not working like it should, yes, we are negotiating with that seller to either repair it if it can be, but likely an HVAC company is going to come in there and say, we can't really fix this. It just needs to be replaced. You'll like this. I just had a client buying a huge house, so like over 7,000 square feet. And this home had 4 air conditioning units. In the inspection, 3 of those 4 air conditioning units did not operate as they should. And so we brought in an HVAC company to diagnose and give their opinion. And they're like, hey, these are all original. They need to be replaced. There is no fixing this. You just have to replace it. So we were able to negotiate a huge sum of money from the seller so that the buyer could install the air conditioning systems that they want to after closing. So it all depends on the situation, but it is definitely something to seriously consider. There's also home warranties that can also help as well.
Yeah, I was going to mention the home warranties, but also too with HVAC. HVAC is very, 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 like, this is one of a touchy subject with us because of mold.
Yeah.
Because we have seen situations where an HVAC system stops working, and then maybe the homeowner has an HVAC company come in and replace the system. And you have to be careful with this because what can happen, let me not say but what can happen is sometimes an HVAC company will come and try to sell homeowners on certain things like, oh, we're going to give you a robust, upgraded, bigger HVAC system. And bigger is not always better. What they try to sell you on is something that's going to blast cold air into the room really fast and get it down to temperature. But what happens is when you get a system like that, it doesn't run long enough. And when it doesn't run long enough, the HVAC system doesn't do another one of its core responsibilities, which is to dehumidify the house. So when you get as a short cycling system that runs, it gets it nice and cold, but you leave all the moisture in the air, and then that stuff starts to settle on the building materials, and then you get mold everywhere. We've seen that.
So we personally, at my house, we just ran into this issue, and I became very educated on air conditioning systems. We don't have a mold issue, but we did a remodel of our house.
Okay.
We discovered like 5 months later when we went to have a fire in our fireplace. So we have an upstairs fireplace and a downstairs fireplace.
Okay.
So we're upstairs in our living room building the first fire of the season, and we had people, family friends come over. They had kids, and the kids were playing in the basement. And they come up and they said, there's smoke in the basement. And we were like, what? Why? Long story short, the builder's HVAC company had put an air return in the basement right next to the fireplace. So it was creating a vacuum effect that as the smoke was coming out one chimney, it was being sucked back in because the heater was pulling down smoke from the upstairs chimney back into the basement. So long story short, there's a lot of HVAC work that needs to be done in my house to correct this issue. And through those conversations that I was having with the HVAC company, I was like, well, why can't we just put in a bigger system? And, he gave me all of that education, which you don't know all these complexities.
And that's why I said, every system is a system that affects another system. So if you do something with the HVAC system, it can affect your indoor air quality in a heartbeat when it's not something that you intended to want to do, but it just, everything has to be designed to specifications. And that's why we look at everything from a building science standpoint.
Yeah, that's great. John asked, are there any factors like slope of the yard, proximity to creeks or ponds that would make you more concerned about mold or radon?
With radon, no. Slope doesn't have anything to do with it. Proximity of creeks, no. There is known to be radon in well water, but you're not anywhere near wells. You don't have to worry about that, and it wouldn't do anything to you anyways.
Right.
With slopes though, mold, I would say yes, that is something to be careful with. If you have a slope near your house that is pushing water towards the house, For instance, when it rains, if you have bad grading, and these are things that can take place over time.
Yeah.
For instance, where sometimes, here's a great example, when a home is not maintained
Right.
for several years, you have trees in the area, gutters get clogged up, it rains and rains and rains and rains and rains over months and months at a time, and you get water that's pouring over gutters, and it basically can create craters. It can create, openings in the dirt and move dirt around to where the grading gets affected. And then what happens is, as it continues to rain, that water can redirect itself towards the house. And when
Right.
it redirects towards the house, you can have water that gets, you get a flooded basement, or you get parts of the home that just get saturated with moisture, and then you get water damage, and it becomes a big mess. So slopes, I do say look out for those in terms of make sure that all slopes are pointing away from the home.
Yeah. Got it. Poppy is asking, they have some extended family that's going to buy down in Statesboro or towards Pooler. Poppy, I'd love to connect you with a really great agent down there. I saw your other comment where maybe you might need a change in real estate agents. I have a great agent partner down there that I can connect you with that can help you with all of the intricacies of buying a home down there. And so you can just send me an email at hello@KeyPoint Homes Group, and we'll get you connected and make sure that you're well taken care of. Well, we have had a great conversation tonight, and I hope everyone has learned a lot. Um, Mold and radon cannot be like the sexiest thing to talk about when buying a home, but it's definitely something that home owners or potential buyers, they need to know about.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, James, for spending time with us today and educating us all about this.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
really
So
enjoyed it. It was fun.
yeah, just as a reminder, when you work with me, we are going to work with James and get your home tested for radon. And he's our go-to if there's any issues or questions about mold or water intrusion or anything like that with your home. So thank you for your expertise and being a great part of our team.
Love to be a part of the team. Looking forward to it. Thanks for
Thank
having me.
you. Yeah, and if you are thinking about making a move to Georgia, North Metro Atlanta area, I really want to be your real estate agent. So you can find my contact information below this video. You can reach out to me and we'll schedule a strategy call to get everything going for you. And if you have not liked and subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that, because then that's going to alert you to every time we put out great videos with great information, just like James said, and educating you all about what's going on here in North Georgia. So thanks for joining us tonight. I'll be back in 2 weeks here on the live stream, and I'll see you on Monday for our latest video that's going to come out here on the channel. Thanks, y'all. Bye, James.
Bye-bye.